Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
It's like, oh yeah, I went out with a guy and he was stuttering, and I finished his food, I finished his sentences, and finished the date.
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Angela Grout. Angela, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Angela Grout, and I am a writer. I publish books, and I have a podcast called Why Write, where I interview writers about their writing process. And I tend to write a lot of fictional memoirs, stories from the dead, murder mysteries, and a lot of sometimes a little bit heavier stuff. So I like to dabble in some comedy to just bring some humor and lightness into my life and into other people's lives, because I really feel that if you have trauma in your life, one of the best healing mechanisms is to laugh.
Absolutely, and most would agree that you have to start comedy with tragedy, otherwise there won't be any surprise, right? So
Yeah.
fundamental component, right?
Yes.
All right, so you ready to get started, Angela?
I am ready to get started. What do we want to talk about? What do you want me to do? Do you want me or do you want my twin on the set?
Aha, is there someone else, or are you talking about alternate personality?
Well, I am a chimera. I don't know if you know what a chimera is, but a chimera is someone with two sets of DNA. And
Okay.
yes, I birthed my own twin, and she came out of me at 14 years old, and it was pretty traumatic. But now I get to talk about how I carry two sets of DNA in me, which is kind of cool, because if I was to commit a crime, you never know what set I'll leave behind.
Nice.
So yeah, I have the Tangela version and then the Angela version. And Angela is the author and the writer, but Tangela is the girl from Three Doors Down, which is my kind of alter personality for comedy.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, it's definitely in line. So, well, perfect. So, well, let me define the whole point of the podcast. Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. So the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So Angela, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
Interesting. I mean, I think, comics can write jokes and tell jokes, like, oh, knock, knock, who's there? Orange, orange, who, aren't you glad I'm here? That's like the comic. The comedian is the person who has the personality, who's going to start telling a story that might just be tragic, but will be hilarious coming out. So yeah, I think I do understand what you're saying, the difference between a comic and a comedian. And comics being like a comic strip, which you read and is funny, and a comedian who is just like a friend who just is telling you a story that you're just, kind of wetting your pants over because you can't believe that either this really happened, or, the made up imagination of this story is just so outrageous that you're like, this is hilarious.
So that's how I see it. Not everybody agrees, but that's pretty much how I see it. So you ready for the first question, Angela?
All right. I got 10 minutes to answer each one, right?
Well, if you want it to be, yeah, then I'll just shorten the rest. So here's the
Okay.
first question. So it's about the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus the real self?
For me, it's a lot of myself. I work with other comedians who definitely do impressions of other people, where they're bringing out like more of an actor style comedy act. I'm not necessarily like that actor. However, I have done scenes where I will reenact a scene where I have to play two people. Like for instance, I do hospice companion care, and sometimes these, people with dementia, they just say the funniest things. So I'm like, hi, how are you doing today, Hilda? Go away, and
Mhm.
doing that is a little bit more of using voices, as opposed to sharing your personality of, hey, I'm a hospice care companion, and every time I go see her, she tells me to go away, but I know that really means come closer and give her a hug.
Oh, well, that's an interesting take on it. So now, I mean, so would you say that authenticity matters, or is illusion part of the magic?
Again, it depends on the style of the comic. It really does. For me, it's more authenticity. For a few of my friends, it's definitely an illusion. Although, I'm doing this, I take from reality. So, like, I've been married 31 years. I haven't dated in a very long time, but I have a whole skit I do about dating life. So, as much as that's an authentic story, it is an illusion of what's going on in my life right now. It's like, oh yeah, I went out with a guy and he was stuttering and
Beady,
I
beady, beady,
finished his
beady.
food, I finished his sentences and finished the date. But did that happen right now as an authentic story to me? No, but has it happened in my life? Yes, but I'm going to bring on that kind of past into the future or into the
I love it.
present.
No, I love it. So you're bringing in the stuttering. So it's perfect for the next question, which is about punching up versus punching down. So where do comics versus comedians stand on this? And let me put it in some historical context. Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
Well, if he did become the comedian that way, I hope it's because he killed the court gesture in a really silly way that they were like, here, eat 17 things of gnocchis and your belly blows up. And then, that's it. But for myself, like I believe that, being able to tell the story has to be part of the joke, but you got to trim the fat. And I've really been working on a lot of that because, I could be like, oh, I went to the park the other day with my friend and we drove in her red Toyota, and it's like, what does that have to do with the joke of the story? It's like trim that out, and then you're like, hey, I went to the park and started seeing some guy put notes on everybody's car saying sorry for the damage, and then everyone's looking at their cars looking for the damage on their car, but there is no damage, and so it's like, was it important to say what color car you were driving, or is it funnier to say you found a note on your car that someone was playing a prank that they did damage to your car? So I think trimming the fat on some jokes are important because you want to do the setup, but you don't need so much setup that it distracts from it.
Yeah, absolutely. The setup could destroy the whole joke if it's
Yeah.
giving away the punchline, or of course it's just off in another direction. Too many
Yeah.
input units, right? If we're
Yeah.
gonna go with the Scientology reference. So, how about the cultural translation of comedy? So, how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
You got to know your audience. I mean, you definitely, I think as a comedian, when you get up on a stage, you have to be able to look around and know your audience. I mean, if I'm, performing in front of the geriatric crowd at the senior center, I'm going to make sure that I'm not, going to be insulting them in any way, whereas if I'm performing at a strip club, I mean, you're going to have different jokes for your audiences. So you just have to really know your audience and, know the language and the comfortability they're at because, for comedians, if you don't read your audience, then you're not going to know what jokes are going to float.
For sure, yeah. I mean, of course, you're going to have your set that you're going to stick to. Now, I'm very curious about is this comedy potentially in a strip club, or we're just going off the cuff with this reference?
No, no, no. So I do a lot of different open mics, to practice new jokes, things like that. And different hosts of different mics end up bringing comedians to different venues. So there is one that he takes comedians to the strip clubs, and they're doing
Okay.
comedy at strip club. It's not really my scene, but that's fine. I always say there's enough comedians and enough venues for everybody. I
Wow.
tend to gear more towards, the senior living society, going into whether it's in the senior centers or doing fundraisers for organizations where the humor's a little more clean, and I'm not saying, like some people can go the racist route. Some people go the really dirty route where whether it's a sexual dirty thing or it's vulgar language. So again, you have to know your audience because if you're going to be sitting there in front of, a bunch of 80-year-old people and you're dropping the F-bomb every minute, they might not find that funny. Whereas if you're at the strip club and you're dropping the F-bomb or you're with an audience who's, 30 to 40 years old doing a fundraiser, there's certain jokes that can be appropriate and it's not going to make the audience uncomfortable or make the comedian come across that, they're not performing properly.
I'm so curious about the strip club because I haven't been to a strip club in like 20 years, so I didn't know that there was even an open mic scene. Are you telling me this is dirt? Like if you were a patron and you didn't know that there was going to be a comedian on stage, is this how it's going down?
I haven't been, as I've said. However, I do have a routine called the stripper with the zipper because I was a stripper for 33 years, but not the kind of stripper that you're expecting. I was the kind of stripper that had a lot of pricks go through my hands, and my father was very proud of me, and I kept a lot of secrets because when men would come to see me in this 30-year career I had, they would order roses from me. And sometimes they'd be sending 1 dozen to their wife and 1 dozen to another woman. So I was the girl who stripped the thorns off the roses and I zipped my mouth. So my stripper with a zipper is a little bit different than the stripper club that we're talking about where performances are. And like I said, I haven't been to those performances, but yes, like sometimes before the opening, have you ever seen The Marvelous Miss Maisel?
Yeah,
Right
absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
Remember, she was at the burlesque clubs. She would open up
Oh
for
yeah.
them at the beginning of the night, do a couple ha ha jokes, talk about her pantyhose or, hey, I'm wearing my sexiest underwear tonight. You know why? A, because it's laundry day. Ha ha ha. So it's like they're throwing those jokes out there and then, the burlesque acts come out. But yeah, I mean, that is a venue that people do. And same thing with I also produce some plays and stuff. So sometimes before the play, we'll have, 1 or 2 comedians come up, do like a 6 minute or a 15-minute set. And then it's like, just kind of warming up the audience, getting them set into the mode that we're in. Like one of the shows I do is it's called Foes of a Minimum Wage Guard, and it's about a senior citizen who's working well past retirement, but he's got all these ailments and it's funny. And because you're there to see this funny show about retail theft and aging, the comedians who come up may be telling jokes about the aging process, I mean, one of my jokes is like we lose hair cells and skin cells every day, but my fat cells have really accepted Jesus Christ as their savior because my fat cells are eternal. And, it's something that the audience can relate to, especially as you're in the aging process. And then, of course, after you have these opening comedians open up the show, then you go into your show. So there's a lot of different avenues for comedians to take because, of course, a lot of them just want their, 1 or 2 hour Netflix HBO show. Like, oh, this is me, I'm Chris Rock, But there's so many other ways to market your humor and to reach audiences.
All right, I love it. This is very enlightening. I got to tell you. Well, so
Oh, good.
very
I
very
mean, look at
important.
all the lighting around you. You're illuminated.
Right.
I love it. I don't have too much lighting here, but oh, and I didn't even
Well,
put my spotlight on.
hey, I love your background. I like the flowers in the foreground. It makes me. It almost seems not real, like it's an image that's been overlaid. But
No,
uh,
this is
but it
this
is
is
okay.
real.
There we go. Just checking.
Yeah, they're real sunflowers reaching for the
Very cool.
sky.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Very important question. Advertising and self-promotion. So who advertises themselves more? The comic, the comedian, or the magician? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon.
Well, I think you have to be a magician in order to be able to showcase your abilities because, you know, self promotion can be very hard for people. And like I said, I'm an author and I write books, and no one's gonna sell your books unless they hear about. No one's gonna buy your books unless they hear about them. And how are they gonna hear about them? You have to talk about them. So if you want to do a comedic gig, or you want to get booked for something, like you have to put yourself out there. And you know, some comedians will share stuff on Facebook and show their little sets and stuff, which is great. I mean, definitely a way to get out there. But it's a matter of, you know, saying, hey, you know, so and so has a restaurant, and approaching them and saying, hey, you know, would you like to have some comedians come, you know, once a month on a Thursday night and, you know, do a little dinner theater with comedians. And you know, you have to be able to come up with the ideas and present them. And I always say it's planting seeds. You know, I mean, you might be at a restaurant one night and you're mentioning it to the owner, and then a couple months later something happens. So you know, you do have to be the magician to throw the magic seed out there, and then you have to kind of wait to find out, you know, if it's gonna take root. And then, you know, during that time, still work on your craft. You know, being a comic, because comics has to work on the craft of it. The comedian is just, you know, kind of that authentically funny storyteller who may just need to trim the fat.
Interesting. So this is where the original question about starting as a comic and evolving into a comedian, I can throw it back to, because do you think that you're just born funny and then that's how it is, or do you think you can actually develop into it?
I think you can develop into it. I do think you can develop into it. I don't think I was born funny. Um, I think the life I was born into, I have to see as funny, because otherwise, you know, like I was saying earlier, when you have traumas or when you go through certain things in life, you know, if you can find the humor in it or the silver lining in it, and sometimes the silver lining is that humor, it
Right.
can just help you along your way. So it ends up becoming a skill that you learn. But I mean, I have an aunt who's just, I mean, she was born funny. I mean, Terry can pour a glass of water and somehow I'm, you know, laughing hysterically just the way she did it, you know, and watching people do things that they didn't intend for it to be funny, but it is hilarious. You know, sometimes that's by accident and sometimes that's because they were born with that kind of humor to do. But I don't want to say I was born with that, but I was, you know, definitely born with the ability to craft it and the interest to do it too.
So can you craft the spontaneous when it comes to like things happening that appear like impossible to have been crafted?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I got a vivid imagination, let me tell you. Like, you know, I like to
Absolutely.
think out of the box. So, you know, like how did the dead girl end up in the woods?
Right.
You know?
Mm, I don't know. How did it?
How did the dead girl end up in the woods? Oh my God, she was driving down the street and then this guy just like grabbed her, brought her into the woods. He thought he was going to have his way with her, but she said no. Then she starts fighting him and she ran. And as she was running, she hits a tree and she falls down. And when she falls down, she happens to land on a sharp rock, and the sharp rock ends up stabbing her and she ends up dead in the woods. Who killed her?
It's a good point. That's definitely
It's
that's like a reverse setup. It's interesting. That's an interesting
Yeah,
way of
who killed her? You know, like we know how she got in the woods, we know what might have happened, but she was running to escape. So therefore, who's to blame? You know, and then the police show up, and then on that rock that was sharpened, it was created by an Indian, and his logo's on there. You know, and
Yeah,
you
no,
can get
that's
into all that
hilarious.
weird forensic stuff and be like, wait a second.
Absolutely. No, that's a hilarious story. Yeah, that's interesting to attempt to translate into stand up as like a joke, but as a story, that would be just
Yeah.
definitely on point. Definitely
Well,
on
it's just
point.
one of those like outrageous stories that, you know,
Right.
if you're gonna do something. I've done, you know, I have seen like the impromptu, like I love Whose Line Is It Anyways? You know, when they come up
Mhm.
with, you know, those things and like, oh, things that you can say about your Christmas tree that you can't say about your spouse, you know, and it's like coming up with like little one-liners and things like that can be very fun.
Absolutely. All right. Censorship and offense. So, who survives better in a cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
Um, well, I'm gonna say the comedian again because they're gonna find humor in the trauma of this canceled society. But a mudslinger, and I'm not a huge fan of roasts. Like when people are roasting, I'm not a huge fan of it, but they can be really funny. And I think
Mhm.
as a mudslinger, when someone's kind of tossing stuff out like that, it can be very funny. So yeah, I think I guess I'm gonna go with maybe the mudslinger.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. If you're given a license to roast, then you should be safe, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, got to get the license to roast. Exactly.
All right. So laughter versus applause. So are comics chasing laughs and comedians chasing applause breaks or a primetime Emmy that validate the message?
Mm. I mean, laughs are always good. When I'm producing or directing a play, I always count my laughs, like the audience laughs. So I do like that. As far as like the with comedians, I kind of like the claps. Like I like when, someone's telling a joke or I'm telling a joke and they're like, yeah, like you get the laugh, but you get the clap with it. So it definitely gives you the validation that, it worked. Um, Emmy, I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about comics getting Emmys unless they're in a movie or something. So
Right.
do they get Emmys?
Yeah, exactly. If it's
Yeah, if
televised
it's in
there,
a if it's in a movie. But again, that's more of, being a comedian who can actually deliver as an actor because they're delivering lines. And I mean, if you're a good actor and you can deliver those lines, yeah, you deserve an Emmy. And the
All
writer who
right.
wrote those lines are going to be thrilled when you win the Emmy because they're like, yeah, I wrote the right line, got the right person to say it.
That's the way to do it. All right,
Yeah.
Angela, are you ready to enter the multiverse?
I get A, B, C, D choices.
Well, you just got a step. So we're in the elevator right now, but we're about to enter, if you're willing, to the next level into the multiverse.
Okay. All right, I'm daring. Let's try something. I'm gonna focus, although, okay, yeah, I'm gonna focus.
All right, board game Zoomcast, play versus performance. So if comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
Oh, I think I'm gonna create the mood, and I'm just gonna sit calmly and create the mood to make everybody just wonder what's going on. Because, as the girl from Three Doors Down, you want to know what's going on. So make it a little mysterious.
Okay. Now, this is why it's the multiverse because you want to have a totem so you don't get lost. So the question
Okay.
is, which character are you going to be, the colorist or the Foley artist?
I will put some color into the story. I will definitely put some color in. I was in, New York last week and, of course, just walking around the city and seeing, the different comedy clubs that you can stop in for an open mic and, all the different theaters and going in to pop your head in to see them and say, what kind of venue would I want to perform in? What kind of audience would I want to see? Do I want them sitting in, chairs all in front of me or at bar stools drinking a drink? And, the ambiance of the lighting, and do I want the strobe lights going? So like all of that plays into the mood of the venue you're walking into. And it's like, oh, well, I think, you want to like just create the atmosphere that you want everyone to walk out with.
I like it.
Which I don't
Strobe
know if
light.
that answers your question or not, but
Yeah, we're getting there.
I'm
I'm
being a
interested.
colorist here. I'm coloring.
Okay, okay. Well, the strobe light is curious. Are we still talking about the strip club or is
Hey, I cleaned a lot of roses. I always like lights all around.
very cool. Okay, so does comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
Well, I think it has to be orchestrated sonically because it's a something you hear. I mean, although yeah, it's something you hear from what I'm doing, but I mean, when you're looking at like the silent films of Charlie Chaplin and stuff like that, where it's not you're not
Mhm.
hearing it, it's hilarious. And like some of the Carol Burnett skits, where she's just mopping a floor. Or you got Lucille Ball who's pouring baked potato mix, the powder mix into a garbage disposal, and all of a sudden mashed potatoes are coming out of her sink. Like, that's funny stuff.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So we have a tradition here on the Comedians in Elevators podcast where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And the previous guest, Angela, was David Stig Hansen. And his question for you, Angela, is, did Atlantis exist?
Yes. 100% it exists. And it still does today because it exists in books and it exists in our minds, it exists in our imagination, and you can't ever let that go away. So yes,
Okay.
it exists.
I'll throw a twist in there. If it exists in our memories or in books, does it also exist in another dimension?
Oh yeah, it can exist in another dimension, absolutely. I mean,
It
look at you,
can,
look like
but
you're in
does
another
it?
dimension right now.
I am. Definitely. I'm in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But but the question is Atlantis also in multiple dimensions currently?
Oh, I think we can create Atlantis wherever we are. You don't necessarily have to go down south or into the ocean. Yeah. You
All
can
right.
definitely you create the reality that you want. So, and as I said before, I was a florist. So if you want to have the Atlantis theme, I mean, we can start building sets and we can create that Atlantis scene in a comedy club or wherever. So, yeah, I mean, we have the blueprint of what it is, whether it was real or not, but we can create the reality of it 100%. And, whether I have to throw a costume on for someone to look like, I'm going to say Sebastian from The Little Mermaid, like, yes, we can make it work.
All right, very cool. All right, last question. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Type 5 survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Ooh. I think the comics are going to be the comics, their jokes are going to last longer. I think the jokes get remembered longer, or whether it's the whole joke or just the fact that it was funny, that you remember, there's
Mhm.
been so many times you'll go to a show, or I've been to a show, and especially if you're at an open mic, you don't know who's up there, but you remember if they were funny, you remember what the joke is. So you take that away sometimes more than the comedian themselves. And yeah, as far as, definitely making sure that the people walk away with a laugh, with a feel good laugh is what is going to outlive anything, especially talking about modern day politics or anything like that.
Absolutely. Well, Angela, thank you so much for being my guest. And where can everybody find you online?
You can find me at angelamgrout.com and at YouTube. It's the little @ sign, small letter Y, WRATE. So you can look me up on YouTube at Y Write or online on Facebook at author Angela Grout or Angela Grout. That's where I am.
Awesome. Well, Angela, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
See you later. Thank you.